What's up? Welcome to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Fast X, aka Fast 10, the 11th film in the Fast and Furious film franchise, the, of course, biggest film franchise in the history of Universal Pictures. People know it, and it's back. Once again, Fast X, the beginning of the end, billed as the first part of a two-part finale that Vin Diesel has since teased might end up being a three-part finale. Either way, we're in the home stretch of the Fast movies, and to some people, it couldn't have come soon enough because Fast and Furious has gotten longer in the tooth, has not been as creatively fulfilling and as broadly entertaining as it had been in its past. I would label the golden years of Fast. This is a lukewarm take. The golden years of Fast is Fast 5, Furious 6, and Furious 7. That is the best segment of Fast and Furious movies. In the post-Paul Walker era, unsurprisingly, the movies haven't been as good. 8 and 9 have been lackluster at best. I think 8's pretty poor. 10, though, I think is better than 8 and 9. I genuinely had a really fun time with this, but I'm also like a fan of the franchise. I've seen all the movies. I know all the characters. I'm on for the ride. I am also on board for the flaws of Fast and Furious. And I think if you're not someone invested in those flaws, if you're a more casual viewer of some of these films, maybe you haven't seen them all, I'd have a hard time recommending this late era of Fast. But I think if you are a fan and you've been able to stick around through this, downturn, you could say, I think Fast X has a lot of fun stuff to it. I had a pretty good time with it. I'm going to get into the issues, get into the stuff I liked. I'm going to get into the wow stuff, the cameos. I will spoil that soon. So broadly, I enjoyed the movie, but of course there's a lot of caveats with liking this franchise at this point. It's really for the hardcore people, I would say. That being said, I think it's pretty fun. A big part of this, let's start right there. Jason Momoa joining the franchise as Dante Reyes, the new villain. Jason Momoa is having a grand old time in Fast X. He is chewing scenery, living it up, being an over-the-top, outlandish, kooky villain. His mannerisms, his fashion, his hair, a brief moment of depravity as he's painting the nails of two of his dead goons. Like, he's an intriguing villain figure, I would say for sure. Definitely a step up from John Cena's presence in F9, and also Charlize Theron in F8, because not anything against those performers who are still back around, of course, with Fast X, but I think this is just a more well-rounded villain character. I think a really fun aspect of this is Fast X begins with archival footage of none other than Fast 5, to most people the pinnacle of the franchise. And we see, of course, the famous set piece where Brian and Dom steal the bank vault in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil and drag the vault with their cars through the streets of Rio. An amazing set piece. And we find out that Dante, Momoa's character, is in fact the son of the villain of F5, Hernan Reyes, the drug lord, the kingpin. And in the process, the Fast and Furious team has used digital insert shots of Momoa and put him into camera of past scenes we saw in F5. This retconning of Fast and Furious continuity is certainly nothing new to the average Fast and Furious fans, and it won't be the last bit of retconning that we get in Fast X at that. But I actually think this is a pretty effective choice and kind of fun as far as how these movies go. I think at this point you have to accept that this franchise is incredibly overstuffed and that the core plot mechanics are really convoluted. Dante, his ability to be a villain, his like power to do what he does throughout the movie. It's a bit unclear how he pulls a lot of that kind of stuff off. We just accept it because you know what? Momoa's fun to watch engage with Dom Toretto. It's cool. Good enough for me. I think a big aspect of Fast X that cannot be understated is that Justin Lin did not direct this movie. Justin Lin, just as the movie was about to go in production, left the film. Justin Lin, of course, helmed 5 previous Fast and Furious movies, and he is a really talented action film director. In its place, Universal hired Louis Leterrier, the French director, who has a pretty solid CV, but definitely is not as celebrated as an action filmmaker the way Justin Lin was. And what we know now from the reporting, especially at the Hollywood Reporter, is that Justin Lin was largely felt like he needed to leave this project and leave this franchise behind because of the studio meddling and the meddling of Vin Diesel himself. This is something we had long suspected, but it basically got confirmed that Justin Lin basically had enough and said, fuck this, I'm out. And, another aspect of Fast X is that the third act had to largely be rewritten, and the location of the filming and the location of the story had to be changed because it was previously going to be set in Eastern Europe, but the war in Ukraine changed the logistical ability to pull that off. So a lot was going on with this movie. The budget is incredibly high. Big part of that budget as well is that this is probably the most well-paid cast in a film franchise. Like reportedly $100 million of the budget is cast salaries, which is ludicrous sum for sure. Like you never hear of that. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with this film, right? So I'm honestly pretty impressed with how much I had a good time with it, given all the stuff going on. Speaking of the retconning, like John Cena comes back in this film after being introduced in F9 as the never heard of before long lost brother of Dom, in itself a retcon. This time around, though, Jacob, his character, is now a good guy shepherding Dom's son to safety throughout the film. It's just a complete 180 for the character, the guy who was trying to kill everyone in the last movie. But in the process, you actually get John Cena at his best, John Cena's strengths, which is being a comedic action actor and not being afraid to poke fun at himself, basically being everything The Rock is not. And that's my favorite version of John Cena. Things like Peacemaker and Blockers, like that's like Cena at his best. And I think this movie actually got Cena into a place where he's like a much more fun character to be with. So that was a retcon I was actually happy to overlook, but it is incredibly overt that the Jacob character just was completely changed. Another nice thing about the film is Charlize Theron, Cypher, the villain of F8, who was also in F9 a little bit. She actually has something to do in this movie. Charlize Theron, of course, one of the greatest action actresses of our time, has not been given a whole lot to do throughout the Fast and Furious franchise, despite being a big bad with seemingly incredible ability on the technical front. However, we got to watch Charlize and Michelle Rodriguez fight. Michelle Rodriguez is Letty, in her own regard, one of the great action actresses of recent times. Getting to watch them fight was awesome because it was actually like fulfilling, I think, scenes from both of them, and Theron really had something to do. That was awesome. I would like more of that stuff because that's like a more grounded like action set piece. I would love more of that stuff, but at least it's a step in the right direction for the Cypher character. Backtracking, the first big set piece of the film is set in Rome and involves basically a race to stop a bomb from blowing up the Vatican, a rolling physical bomb. And I think it's a pretty fun set piece, all things considered. A lot of drone shots and vista shots of like Rome, which is a really obviously picturesque city. Unclear how much, if any, filming was really done there. Like you don't really see the actors on the ground at all. It's all like the insert shots with the cars and stuff. So it doesn't really seem like they were really there. But the drone shots communicate it well enough. And the thing about the Rome scene, though, is it couldn't help but remind me of the opening 30 minutes of the Michael Bay Netflix film Six Underground, which takes place in Florence. That is a propulsive 30 minutes, incredibly thrilling, by far the best part about that movie. Michael Bay's action chops, of course, are leagues above what Louis Leterrier can pull off. So it just left me a bit wanting because I've seen an action set piece in Italy featuring cars that was way better just a few years ago. So that immediately stuck in mind to me. But still, pretty solid set piece, all things considered. That's another thing with Fast, right? It's iterating on itself, which in and of itself is iterating on action filmmaking convention of the past. There's a lot of playing the hits and similar beats with this franchise when you're in the 11th movie at this point. It's hard things to feel like super inspired, especially with Justin Lin no longer involved. And in its place, you just get things that are bigger and more outlandish and over the top. It doesn't necessarily mean they're always as fulfilling to watch and feel as creatively inspired. So hopefully, Fast Fast 12, whatever we call it, Fast X2. Hopefully that is they find the right um, temperature with that. Think about back to Fast 9, right? People have talked about for years, right? Fast and Furious has gotten so bigger and so much crazier and over the top. The only thing left that they have left to do is to go to space. And what they do in F9? They went to space. The problem, though, was it wasn't that cool. It didn't land. It was not anyone's favorite moment of that movie, and that was in itself a flawed movie, It just wasn't that awesome. And that's kind of the issue that Fast incorporates right now, where like the execution just might not be there anymore. Speaking to all the retconning, like obviously F9 pulled one of the biggest retcons of all off in the history of the franchise, bringing Han back to life. We thought Han was dead. Just a few movies ago, there was, I think, a really effective retcon, which was Jason Statham's character, Deckard Shaw. Shaw was the one who killed Han at the end of Tokyo Drift in that crash. Then we find out, no, actually death was faked all along by Mr. Nobody in the agency. And it's like, okay, I like Sung Kang. Nice to have him back. I like Han. Han doesn't have a whole lot to do in this movie, and a lot more going on in 9. I think the Han stuff's more fulfilling in 9 easily. You can maybe let it go, right? Now, spoilers to come right now, but they basically run this beat back at the end of this movie. Fast X ends with a massive cliffhanger, basically resolves no plot at all. It's literally a hard cut. If you thought Dune had a hard cut, you haven't seen Fast X, because this is literally a pause in the middle of the action. What ostensibly would be your third act, conclusion. Just there is no third act conclusion. The third act just goes, and then it has like a brief detente ends. And when the last scene, Charlize Theron and Michelle Rodriguez encounter a nuclear sub rising up out of the ice of Antarctica. Perhaps it's the sub in Fast 8. I don't remember that sub get destroyed. I don't, there's so much going on. I don't remember if it could be the same sub. But who pops out of the hatch? None other than Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot's character, who died on the runway in Furious 6. So we thought. Once again, they brought someone back to life like they did with Han. People were thinking, what was there left to do? They went to space. The only thing left to do now is to bring back Gal Gadot. Was to bring The Rock back into the franchise somehow. Get him and Vin Diesel to make amends and have The Rock be willing to return. Of course, his character was never killed. He just wanted The Rock, and Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Vin Diesel didn't like each other anymore. Those are the only things left to achieve. And guess what? They did both of those in this movie, because this stinger scene is none other than the return of Hobbs, the return of The Rock to the franchise. And I kind of just stood there like with a smile on my face, or sat there with a smile on my face, shaking my head at the end. I was like, wow. All the things we said they had left to do, they did. Space. Gal Gadot's a zombie. The Rock's back. There's nothing left. I don't know what there is left to do. To me, my dream, my pie in the sky idea, which I just don't think will happen with I just don't think Vin Diesel wants to go this route. I'm sure Universal isn't interested in this route either. It would be really fun if the franchise downshifted, pun intended, back to the roots of the franchise, right? Smaller stakes, back to street racing, and actually make it about family. They say it's about family all the time in this late run, But these characters, they don't have any time to have any real emotional scenes. They don't have any time to really have any character building scenes at all, because it's really just a rush to do the set piece, a rush to separate the large ensemble cast that keeps ballooning, separate that cast as quickly as possible. That way you can set up all these different scenes, because that's the only way they can service all these characters at this point. It'd be really cool if they could take it back a notch. But you brought Han back to life. You brought Gal Gadot back to life. You're bringing Hobbs back in. It just doesn't seem like we're going to go that way. You retcon your new villain to be directly connected to the peak of the franchise with Fast 5, in the case of Dante. It's just all connected and building on top of itself. But in the process, I feel like we're just losing any semblance of stakes. Not that I expect Vin Diesel to die. I don't expect Dom to die. I don't expect the stunts not to pull off. But if no one, even an ensemble supporting character, can die, then I don't know, like, I think you're just kind of lacking its sense of tension. And if you're lacking the tension, okay, I want the set pieces to be better then. That way I'm entertained enough to not care that there's no real tension, you know? So it's a really fun place to be for all its outlandishness and over the topness and convolutedness. And we'll see, I thought Brie Larson, the character, introduced as Mr. Nobody's daughter we didn't know about, fine. Uh, Brie Larson's the script doesn't do her a whole lot of favors. She's a talented actress, Oscar winner, but she doesn't have a whole lot to do. She looks great, obviously. The action stuff she does get to do is fun, but I would like more from that character, and I thought her performance was a bit stilted. The other villain, who's not really a villain until the end, is I forget his name. The guy who plays Jack Reacher on Amazon, a massive hulk of a human being. He's like pretty solid, pretty fun. I was a bit confused about how he was actually bad and connected to Dante once that like twist at the very end of the movie comes to be. But he fit in fine. He actually could go like toe to toe in this scene with Toretto, so that was cool. Yeah, I think you think about like the ensemble, right? Like Jordana Brewster's in the movie incredibly briefly, but this reminds you of one of like the glaring plot holes of this franchise is that Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker's character, is not killed off. He's just out of frame moving forward, and he also will never step in to save his family, his extended family, at any time, right? So if you want to be afraid of where this franchise could go next, I think there's a non-zero chance that the very last movie might feature Paul Walker's brothers plus, CGI, AI, stand-in facial tech to digitally recreate Brian in one way or another. Would not be shocked if we saw something like that. We know his brothers were involved in double work to complete Fury 7 after Walker's tragic death. I don't want that to happen. I don't think anyone wants that to happen, but don't rule it out is all I'm saying. Jordana Brewster's barely in the movie, right? Roman and Tej and Ramsey, they have really, and Han, they have nothing to do all film. They're just kind of going from place to place trying to meet up with Dom, and they don't. The movie ends and they're almost back up with him, but they don't actually see him at all after the very beginning of the movie. And, in a sense, it's kind of playing the hits of what they've been doing recently, right? It's like Roman and Tej, Ludacris and Tyrese. It's the same bit they've been doing, just kind of bagging on each other. But I don't know, like I do find it really fun just because I think Tyrese is still just really hilarious as Roman. Like he's played for comic relief, he has been for some time now, but I still laugh. I don't know what to say. Like I have a really good time with them, even if they really didn't get to do much of anything in this movie. Yeah, I don't know. That's a lot of stuff, you know. Crazy cliffhanger. This movie, Fast X2, whatever it is at least 2 years away. It hasn't been filmed yet. We'll see if it ends up being the second of a 3-part ender. The box office with this movie is coming in a tad down from F9, which is a real dip because Fast X is coming out in a stronger theater environment than F9 did in 2021 during, the pandemic was still really affecting movie theaters at that time. So the franchise is in decline, that's for sure. Not going to gross $1 billion this movie, but $800 million, still a really solid performance worldwide. Obviously, this movie cost a lot for various reasons, COVID related, salary related, reshoot related. The delays between directors cost production time. Expensive movie. They shouldn't cost this much moving forward just because the franchise actually can't sustain that anymore. Like the performance in China doesn't match what the performance was, 6-7 years ago, and it's not going to. So you need to recalibrate what you expect this movie to pull off. But still really solid, really good blockbuster franchise in terms of performance. Even if it doesn't hit $1 billion, 800 million plus, it's still really strong. Nothing to sniff your nose at. So there's a lot of runway left for the decline of Fast and Furious. Let's slow the roll on trying to bury the franchise. We're far off from that, that's for sure. But I'd be curious to see how these legs perform. as Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is holding on well. Little Mermaid's about to come out just this upcoming week. So we'll see how the movie holds. You know, the critical panning won't help. We'll see. But let me know, how did you feel about Fast X? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff about the movie, a lot of things to like and enjoy, a lot of things to scratch your head at, a lot of things to be confused at, a lot of stuff that's a combination of all of that. I think that's just kind of what these movies are at this point. Um, yeah. So, Fast X, let me know what you thought. And for more movie reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.